Tonight when we're talking about cognitive decline and can it be reversed, um, I have a lot of good news to share with you because one, it's a path I walked myself. And to let you know how terrible it is you're walking into a dark tunnel and there's no light at the end of that tunnel. So if you know someone who is beginning cognitive decline, or if you've had a relative or a loved one and you've watched them just go from repeating themselves or telling the same story over and over to perhaps even worse, and we'll talk about some of the other things, into getting worse and worse, people usually begin saying, what can we do? How can we help? Is there any hope? And for so many years, it was considered that there wasn't any hope. But now you can find lots of information on potentially how to slow it down. You can find less information on how to reverse it. Cognitive decline is a very broad reaching subject. It There's a natural cognitive decline that occurs with aging. So it stands to reason that if you can reverse anything in your cellular aging, it might also help your mind. Cognitive decline is also associated with many medications. I have a lot of calls every week on physical, mental, emotional, addictive health and on learning and behavior. If I had journaled how many calls I've received on cognitive decline, it's going to be the hundreds, maybe thousands over these last years. So, what is the first question I ask? I ask their age. And if they're like, well, mama's 96, I'm going to say, well, a lot of this is age related. Let's do what we can. But just this week, I was speaking with a lady who told me that her mother was doing pretty good. She was just pretty normal. And then I don't think it was I can't remember exactly how many months ago. I want to say maybe even January. She started in a cognitive decline. And this past week, she didn't know who her daughter was. That's extremely rapid. And in cases like that, you've got to look for a brain tumor. You've got to look for a lot of different things. That's when you pull out the big guns, neuro scans, CAT scans, and everything. But after I ask the age, my second question is what medications are their own. Now, if you don't believe what I'm saying, you can check me when I get off. The medication Crestor, well-known medication, um, I don't know, probably 14 years ago, somewhere in tiny print somewhere, I read that it could cause cognitive decline. And the reason I was researching was a young man had called me and said his mother-in-law had, in 4 months, gone from a lady who was living a normal life, working, to serious cognitive decline. So I began looking for triggers for smoking guns. So I had our medication list and I was reading all the small print. And I was putting things in the computer like uh, dementia and then the drug. And these are not the normal side effects that are going to pop up. But way down here in the small print, way into the pages, I saw that it could cause short-term memory loss. So I called him and said, take your mother off Crestor. Within a month, she was back. So the second question I always ask is, what medications are you taking? There are a number of medications that can cause brain fog, but these medications can cause much more serious cognitive decline. And then I usually ask, is there anyone else in the family with it? Now, that was the case with me. I had relatives who had early stage dementia. I had watched them progress. I knew what it was. I also had been working with so many people, just administering situations through the years, where I knew their parents were on medications for memory, and I knew they weren't getting any better. So when I began my own journey, I was about 60 years old. I had had a remarkable memory in the past, but I hit about 60 and I started making a joke and saying, well, when I blew out my birthday candles on my 60th birthday cake, my memory went with it. I was usually preceding that because of senior jokes. By the time I was between 62, 63, 64, I began resigning from a lot of responsibilities. Too much was falling through the crack. And then when I hit 65, I had done a major women's conference and realized I couldn't finish the scriptures I was supposed to be teaching about. I couldn't finish my sentences. And I typically could stand and teach 3 or 4 hours, most of it without notes. So here I was struggling with my notes, struggling to remember material I'd taught so many times. And when I finished, I knew I couldn't do it anymore. So I quit accepting any speaking engagements. So at age 67, along with an injured back, I was looking at loss of mobility from my back injury and loss of memory at age 67. I was doing a lot of praying, Lord, don't let me lose my mind. So I'm 81 now. So there's been a lot of water under the bridge. I've done a lot of research on cognitive decline. It's one of my favorite subjects to talk about because, number one, you don't have to have it. Secondly, yes, it can be reversed. Third, the sooner you get on the pathway to reversing it, the better. So you can have genetic cognitive decline, and that's going to be in the proportion to what you do to prevent it or keep it in control. The other thing is just plain disease, other diseases you can get. One of those is obesity. Obesity can cause mental decline, as can diabetes too, as can arteriosclerosis, as can high blood pressure. Also, environmental toxins. Environmental toxins are one of the major causes of cognitive decline. I was just reading something earlier today, or maybe I saw it on the news about something we've known about for a long time. Finally, they're talking about it on the news. Um, how the plastics that we put, the food packaging, the toxins in it contribute to breast cancer and endocrine disruption and hormones and everything. We have been talking about this now for 20 years. So finally now the media is picking up on something that maybe we can get something done about. The other thing, heavy metals, accumulation of lead, too much copper, too much aluminum, especially aluminum in your brain, disrupts your brain activities. And then one of the number one reasons for cognitive decline is air pollution. So why would these things cause you to start losing your memory? Well, most of the cognitive decline does occur in your frontal lobe. And when that frontal lobe shrinks, as it does with normal aging, you're going to have some memory loss. However, if it becomes inflamed through any of these things I've mentioned, or if it becomes to the cells in it where they can't operate properly because of inflammation or because stuff's in there that's not supposed to be in there, simply can't do its job. And this typically doesn't get better, it gets worse unless there's some interventions. So I'm going to share with you a little science right now. So let's see what we've got here. First of all, I wanted to point out what is just becoming common knowledge now. It's commonly, when I started teaching about free radicals back in the 80s, people thought I was off my rocker. As it became better known, people still thought, well, there's nothing we can do about it. After we found out there is something we can do about it in a blood test, and I began teaching, I began to see how many, in fact, any disease you can name is connected to one thing in your body, oxidative stress. This science article, which is from the Journal of Neuroinflammation, says that oxidative stress does what? It predicts your cognitive decline with aging in healthy adults. Now, isn't that interesting? So you don't have to be unhealthy to start your cognitive decline. And the reason why is that this oxidative stress can precede pro-inflammatory states as in vascular disease. But that's in all of these diseases, neurodegenerative, all of this can affect that important lobe in the brain where you're going to make your executive decisions. So often with dementia and with cognitive decline, one of the first things, and we saw this in a friend of ours, was just decisions that made no sense. A man who was brilliant, we'd always looked to him for wisdom, and he was making some really, really poor decisions. It was probably 5 or 6 years before we realized he was entering into dementia. Now, these people in this particular study were followed for 4 years, and every year they had a cognitive assessment. They were looking for 15 things. One of the things they were looking for was glutathione, and this very important, some of you've heard me say, get your C-reactive protein measured in a blood test. Make your doctor do it. The first time I mentioned it to one of my doctors, the doctor said, well, I don't even know what that is. And I said, well, can you test? And they looked in their little information and they went, yeah, we can test for it. And they've continued to test people for it because it is a marker of what can be happening in your brain even before you know it. This one also supports this same thing, oxidative stress, cognitive decline. And this is the neuroprotective role of natural antioxidants. Most of you already know by now that we spend a lot of time talking about the antioxidants that your body makes. This little article from PubMed, The Emerging Roles of Oxidative Stress in Brain Aging and Alzheimer's Disease. If you have time to read some of these, but you're going to find what I'm saying is true. You're going to find every one of those will indicate that the higher your oxidative stress, the higher your brain inflammation, and the higher the chances are that your cognitive function will decline. Many of you have heard me talk about the role of NRF2 in our body. NRF2's job is to check out our DNA in every cell. It sits in every cell. It's going to check out the DNA in every cell. And then it's got to send the message to the survival genes. With cognitive decline, when it sends this message from these cells in the brain, it's going to say, survival genes, get on your job. Get on your job. And you'll see this little sentence here. It has been shown to directly regulate the expression of anti-inflammatory mediators, reducing the expression of pro-inflammatory cytokines. In recent years, this points out that this little NRF2 that's in every cell in your body has been studied in so many different forms in neurodegenerative, especially in dementia and cognitive decline. Now, as we are talking a little bit more tonight, we're going to talk about what else you can do. When I talk to people, regardless, unless they have had a transplant, and they say, what can I do? I'm speaking to people in their 20s and 30s. I'm talking to young men in their 40s and 50s because I'm a grandmother, and sometimes they'll tell me things, and they'll be like, Miss Sheppard, my mama had Alzheimer's when she was old, but I think I'm getting it early. And so, first of all, I usually explain, well, here's the big title, dementia, and then there's all sorts of things under that. So let's see what we can talk about and do. The first thing I tell them to do is introduce the power of NRF2 to your body. It will affect your mind. This is clinical. You can test it. You can see it in a blood test. You can do oxidative stress test. You can do glutathione test. You can do all sorts of things, but the best test is getting your memory back. For me, in about 4 months, I knew my memory was better. In 6 months, I had my brain back. It just came back. What happened? The inflammation began to lower in my brain. So whatever was accumulating now, was I eating a healthy diet? Absolutely. Did I smoke? Did I use alcohol? Did I do all these other things? No, I did breathe air, and if the air is polluted, then of course I would be breathing some polluted air. But I'd had heavy metals tests. I had had toxic chemical tests. I had been looking under every rock. And it finally, for me, boiled down to, well, it's genetic. So can this be changed if it's genetic? Well, there is a study on PubMed.gov that indicates that genes that are underexpressed can be, if it receives the right thing, they can start expressing higher. The same thing with genes that are overexpressed. So can it be changed? It can be changed. Now, can I guarantee you that your mother, your granddaddy is going to get their mind back of a 20-year-old? No. One of the first people I talked to when I started this journey years ago, she had been led to our amazing Nerve 2 activation by a doctor, and he wanted her to call me and talk to me about her experience. And she told me about her husband who had reached what they call the zombie stage, where he was no longer talking. And this particular doctor suggested that he try our amazing product, NRF2. There's no guarantees. We don't make any guarantees about it, other than it is clinically proven to reduce free radical damage. And for him, that's what was needed. Within a few weeks, he had begun talking. They'd been able to pick up their life. So I said to her, well, I don't know that you're going to get your husband back. And she said, Mrs. Sheppard, we can now go out to eat and have a conversation together. That's a lot. For the people who've lost their mother, their husband, their granddaddy through cognitive decline, being able to start getting that person back is huge. So the first thing I say is drop oxidative stress. Activate the NRF2 pathway in your body. Get those survival genes on their job. Upregulate that glutathione and superoxide dismutase. And then you can either, for the next 6 months, for example, increase your multivitamins, especially your B vitamins. You need vitamin D3. You need to get that level up. I like to see it up around 50 to 70. Your vitamin B12. Quite often, dementia is strictly a deficiency in vitamin B12. Get your nutritional deficiencies sorted. That's going to be consistently taking your vitamins and minerals, your vitamin D3, your B12. And after that, by the time we hit 6 months, if you've not seen amazing improvement, we can look for some of the other bad guys. But right now, it's simple to start a path back toward reversing cognitive decline. Of course, your mitochondria is involved. There's a lot of other things involved. Obesity can be huge with cognitive decline. There's a lot of things we can work through But usually it begins to show that it was an overproduction of oxidative stress. You drop 10% every decade in your good guys production, which means your free radicals, which cause the oxidative stress, can get the upper hand. So if you know someone with cognitive decline, then share this little video with them. And then we'll see if there's anything we can do to help.